Hey everyone, Connor Moss here with Warm Heart Counseling. I wanted to go live today to talk a little bit about the stages of change, and more specifically, how to know if you or your loved one are ready to commit to quitting drinking or quitting drugs. I think that for a lot of people, trying to assess when it's time or trying to come up with the motivation to actually stop can be really difficult, especially if you're dealing with a loved one who's struggling with addiction. It can be really hard to know how hard to push or when to push or what the best strategy is to help them to change. And if you're dealing with addiction yourself, you might have noticed that you kind of go through these different stages where sometimes you'll have a lot of motivation, other times you won't. And so what the stages of change is a framework to help you understand what are the stages that most people go through when they're making a big change in their life, such as quitting drugs or alcohol. And the stages of change outlines the 5 different stages that most people go through in this journey. So this video is for you if you or a loved one are struggling with addiction or alcoholism, and you're looking to understand further how and why this is happening and how and why quitting might be on the table. So I hope you find this helpful. So there are 5 stages of change, and the first I'll just go through them quickly and then go into more depth on each of those stages and what you might need in each of those stages. So the stages are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And we're talking about, specifically how to quit drinking or drugs, but this is really also the stages of change that people go through anytime anyone's making a big change in their lives. So in pre-contemplation, you are starting to think about it. In contemplation, you're thinking about it more fully. Preparation, you're preparing to make the change. Action is where the change actually happens. And maintenance is maintaining that change over time. And if you look at addiction or alcoholism journeys, they tend to follow this same path. And the important thing to remember is that at different stages on this journey, the person who's trying to quit drinking or drugs is going to need very different things. And for example, if you're in pre-contemplation and you try to use certain tools that you're not ready for, they might be really ineffective. So what I want to do here is to help you understand for yourself or for your loved one, if you're helping them try to quit, what they'll need at each particular stage. Because it really is somewhat of a delicate process, and it's important that time and attention and care is given to this process and to each stage of this process. So the first stage is pre-contemplation. Pre-contemplation meaning you're not even thinking about it yet. So this is someone who's drinking or using. They don't see any problem with their use. They have not even started contemplating what it would be like to quit. They don't really see any reason to quit. And we see people in pre-contemplation kind of before major consequences have started to come into their lives. Or I think of teenagers smoking or college-age students drinking. There's really no thought given, for the most part, to quitting or stopping use of these substances at those stages. It's kind of the honeymoon period, or the honeymoon period is over, but they're kind of still stuck in this thinking that this is a good thing and there's no problems there. If you or a loved one are in pre-contemplation, well, if you're in pre-contemplation, you're probably not watching this video. If a loved one is in pre-contemplation, then it can be really tough because you can be wanting to use these tools, try to get them into therapy, try to show them this video, for example, or try to give them tools, get them to go to meetings, but they're not at that stage yet. They're in this state where They're not even thinking about quitting. And really, when you're in this stage, there's nothing that can get you to quit besides an internal shift. There's nothing that can get you from pre-contemplation to contemplation besides an internal motivated shift. So outside sources telling you, you need to quit, you should try this, you should try going to meetings, you should try going to therapy. It's going to be met with a lot of resistance. And it can be really frustrating for someone if your loved one is in this stage and you're trying to offer them help and they're refusing it. So it's important to recognize the difference between pre-contemplation and the rest of the stages. In pre-contemplation, there's not even the thought yet that quitting should happen. So in pre-contemplation, the thing that the person needs the most is time. Um, Over time, if their use is problematic, they will experience more consequences, and they will come to the internal motivation to start thinking about it if the consequences are bad enough. So it can be really hard if you're in this stage or if your loved one is in this stage, but there's really nothing you can do but give them time to work through, to experience the consequences so that they start to think about it. Setting boundaries in this stage is a good idea if a loved one is suffering through this so that they experience those consequences sooner and they start to get to contemplation sooner. And the danger here is that if you'll enable them, or if you're struggling with this, if you're enabling yourself and you just get stuck here, you never really experience the consequences and you never really start to think about other ways to be. So what you need is time and boundaries, and the danger is really getting stuck there. Eventually, you'll hit rock bottom. Something will happen that's so bad that you'll have a moment of clarity and you'll realize, maybe I wonder what my life would be like if I weren't using these substances. And this is the stage of contemplation. In contemplation, uh, if you're using or a loved one is using, you're starting to think about, for the first time, what would it be like? You're weighing the pros and cons. I get this out of using the substance, but I'm getting these consequences. And there's a contemplation that's going on around the substance, around the alcohol, to try to understand, to try to think about what would it look like if I were to quit. What you need in this stage is decisiveness. If you are starting to think about these things and you're wondering, well, maybe it would be better if I quit, I wonder what that would look like, you need to find a way to come to decisiveness. And this is where interventions can be helpful, or therapy, to help you get clear on the fact that maybe it really is time to stop. So the need is decisiveness, and the danger here is overthinking. If you get stuck in contemplation, you can contemplate for a decade. Maybe I should stop. Maybe you should. But if you're only thinking about it and you're stuck in the contemplation about it, it's going to be hard to move to the next stage of preparation. So in contemplation, the need is decisiveness, and the danger is overthinking. Now, eventually, if you make that decision strong enough for yourself, you're going to be moving into the clarity stage. Into the preparation stage. Um, in preparation, you've made the decision that it's time to quit, and you're just coming up with the best strategies to actually quit. Internally, you already know that you need to quit. At this stage, the drinking and drugs often get a lot less fun because in the back of your mind, you kind of know this needs to stop. And once you've made that decision, it's inevitable that you'll eventually start to move towards these later stages. So that decision is really important. And in preparation, this is where therapy is really helpful. This is where community support is really helpful, because what you need is a really clear plan. What you need is clarity. When you're preparing to quit, it's helpful to come up with a super clear plan on what you're going to do day by day to help get you through those first 30 days of recovery. And addiction is really tricky. Alcoholism is really tricky. And if you don't have a really clear plan going into it, if you're not very clear with yourself on this is how I'm going to go about this, it can be difficult to stay sober for whatever your goal time is, if you're trying to stop completely or trying to stop for a certain period of time. So getting in therapy, getting in a group, talking about your plans or your desires to quit is really helpful here. And the danger here is that you're underprepared if you or overconfident. If you think, oh, I've got this, all I just need to do is stop, and you don't come up with a clear plan, um, you may be setting yourself up for a relapse in the next stage. So in preparation, the need is clarity of super clear plan, and the danger is overconfidence and under preparation. So eventually the time has come, the day has come to stop completely, and this is where you move into the action stage. In the action stage, you are stopping using, but you are also building in recovery activities in your life. Um, Staying active in recovery, in therapy, in support groups, 12-step groups, or whatever support you might find is really essential. And this is a very fragile time and a very important time. And what's really needed here is a strong motivation. You need to stick with your plan. You need to drive this plan forward. You need to engage in your recovery communities. And if you're doing all those things, then the action step is can be really difficult because you might be going through withdrawals, but it's also one of the most rewarding because you're actually starting to take those first steps towards change in your life. So what the need is here is motivation. And I definitely recommend getting support from other people to shore up your motivation, whether that be in therapy or support groups. And the danger here is laziness. If you get comfortable, if you get lazy in this action stage, it's going to be very easy to relapse because you're so close to the use. The patterns are still so present for you that it's very easy to fall back into that. So in the action stage, motivation is key, and um, laziness or complacency is going to be the danger. Now, once you've gotten past those 30 days, 60-day, 90-day checkpoints, um, you'll find yourself in a bit of a maintenance stage. You've already quit the drug, you've quit drinking, you're feeling good, but the journey of change is not over yet because what you need to do over time is maintain this change if you want it to stick. So in the maintenance stage, what you really need is endurance. You might think you've won this battle, but there's actually a lot more to go. Um, some people say it's easy to quit, but staying sober is the hard part. I don't know if I would say it's easy to quit, but definitely staying sober is a key part of the change journey that you're in. So if you find yourself in the maintenance stage past those 30, 60, 90 days, it's really important that you stay engaged. Stay engaged in your recovery community, stay engaged with the folks that motivate you, stay engaged with your therapist, because even if you think you've got this beat, it's still a very fragile time in those first couple of years. And it's so much easier at this point to stay sober than to go through the relapse and have to start this process over again. So if you find yourself in the maintenance stage, I strongly recommend keeping the endurance up and keeping moving forward with your recovery program, even past the point where you feel like you need it. Sticking with the program, sticking with this motivation towards change well past the time when the change is actually made is going to set you up for longer term success. So the need here is endurance. It can feel like a marathon, and it's really important that you find a way to stay motivated in the long run for this change. And the danger in the maintenance stage is getting too comfortable. If you feel like you've got this beat, you've made this change, and you don't need to put any more effort into your mental health or your recovery program, unfortunately, it's very easy at this point to end up in a relapse. So in the maintenance stage, keeping your foot on the gas, staying engaged, staying focused on your mental health and getting the support for yourself is essential. And you want to try to avoid getting too comfortable and sliding back into old habits. So, those are the 5 states of change from pre contemplation to contemplation to preparation to action and maintenance. And if you follow these 5 steps, this is where I see most people successful, is when they really apply themselves to each of these 5 steps. So I hope you found this helpful. If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, I really wish you all the best. I know how difficult that can be. And if you're needing support, outside support from a therapist, feel free to reach out to me and I'd definitely be happy to talk. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you found this helpful and I will see you all next time. Take care. Bye.